the ever-present danger of wildland fires can come on a moment's notice and wipe out an entire community.
A lot of times people think there's a fire coming, there's going to be a fire engine parked in my driveway, and there's not. There's going to be one engine to hundreds of homes.
We want to give people prior warning to start evacuating, and compliance with those orders is pretty important for us because we're trying to worry about stopping the fire, keeping it out of people's houses, life safety.
So you may only get the initial warning that it's time to prepare to evacuate. But if you get that, you should be activating your plans. And then you should also be keeping an eye out and literally keeping an eye outside. And if you feel that the fire is getting closer, and if you wonder whether or not I should be putting my plan into action, then that's your key that yes, you should. And go ahead and activate that plan and evacuate yourself to the refuge point or out.
Fires are becoming more frequent. They're much more expensive because they're taking out more businesses and homes and property. If your house catches on fire and everybody's getting out of the house, especially if you have a 2-story house, practice getting out from those upstairs bedroom windows. You know, have a rope ladder that you can just hook onto the sill and the kids can get out if that's the only way out that they can go. And have a meeting place. People
by nature have the ability to become complacent, lackadaisical. It'll never happen to me. It still happens all the time, no matter how many fires we have, no matter how many Paradises and Concals and Napas and Redding fires you have. There are still people that are complacent. It'll never happen to me.
California doesn't have a fire season anymore because we have wildfires year-round. And it's likely to get worse as climate change continues, as the drought continues.
And what we're seeing is that fire is behaving even more unpredictably, and it's causing more destruction. And certainly there's more people living close to these places where that can happen as well. So the human factor is really the biggest issue. We've wanted to suppress fire for so long that we've actually created a bigger problem.
So now we have 100 years of fuel accumulation or more in some areas. Higher temperatures in the summertime. Summer seems to last a little longer. So you combine that, hotter, drier conditions with higher fuel loading conditions, and it's a recipe for disaster. And so that's what we're seeing now is these big catastrophic wildfires because the forest stand density is much larger than it should be by hundreds of trees per acre. And all that debris that was raining down, that's just waiting to burn, that would have burned every 7, 15, or 25 years. It's a fire-adapted ecosystem, and we excluded fire from that ecosystem.
We haven't been in situations with such severe drought and overloading of fuels, dead materials in the forest in recorded history. So this is all new in terms of how we're applying the science we have with the current state of affairs on the ground.
Policy was to put out the fires as quickly as possible. We wanted to save the resources that we had out there. So timber was a big resource, and clean drinking water was the other big resource. Brush that normally would get burned didn't get burned, so they got bigger and more of. And so you combine all that, and that's a huge fuel load that wasn't meant to be there.
In the case of the Erskine fire, we had a weather for that time in June that was off the charts, right? Beyond records, beyond normal. in terms of temperature, really low humidity, and sustained winds that were at or above what we would typically see that time of year. It all created the perfect recipe for high fire danger.
The Erskine fire was on my district. I worked on that district when it started. There was a large number of mobile homes and homes burned because that fire ran like the first day it was running with the wind. It was really narrow.
The Erskine fire, which was catastrophic and devastating and was a fatality fire and consumed nearly 300 homes.
It like blew from west to east. I think in the first day it ran 11 miles in a strip going from west to east.
When we actually have an incident like that, I think the most important thing that people can do is listen to the authorities. They tell them to evacuate. There's a reason. The fire might not be breathing right down you, but that's not the time when you want to be leaving.
When we do get a fire, a lot of the times, we're building up to the incident. We're trying to like plan out what we've got to do to stop the fire. So those are our thoughts. And then, as we get chiefs on scene or we're working with law enforcement, we're also going to start looking at the evacuations.
You need to be paying attention. A lot of what happens during that time is going to be up to each individual resident to make sure that they heed the warnings and that they actually follow through with a lot of the advice that's given them. Not only advice on that day that it's happening, but advice on what's been given to them from now moving forward. That advice being that you need to be ready and you need to have a plan in case there is a fire and in case an evacuation is called upon.
When people don't comply, then that adds to our workload. Now we have life safety issues. We have to get in there and protect that area because there's people there. So compliance is very important. Listening to the evacuation warnings, evacuation routes, where to go, where to shelter.
Sometimes there are going to be emergencies that are so overwhelming that it's going to take all the resources from the first responders. So you may only get the initial warning that it's time to prepare to evacuate.
There's a homeowner responsibility to make it so that your home will survive because the firefighter's not going to be in your driveway. They're not going to be there with the fire hose.
Depending on where we're coming from, limited manpower, how long it takes to get people here, we want you to protect yourselves. And the way you can do that is by making sure that you have that defensible space. When we talk about variables, you can't control what your neighbor does if he does his hazard reduction. You can't control where the fire is coming from. You can't control how a fire starts, but you can control if you do your own hazard reduction. So, providing that defensible space for your own property is your way of protecting yourself.
But if we don't do what we can do at our local properties and ourselves personally, that could translate into a lot of destruction that eliminates all the things that we come to live in this place for.
Creating a defensible space around your home so there's no risk of fire spreading to your property. It's understanding your environment, understanding where you're living, what kind of environment you are living in, and doing all they can to prepare themselves for the worst case scenario, if you will, and not a question of if, but when.
When it comes to your home or your property or where you live, it's not just about your property and your valuables, right? But it's about your community, your neighbors, and everything that's important to them and why we all live in these beautiful places called the wildland urban interface. We want to be close to nature.
Our goal and objective is, through public education and awareness, is to teach people how to prepare themselves, their homes, their family, to go have their own little escape drills, know what they need to take in the event they have an emergency evacuation from the result of a fire.
Nothing ever goes to plan. You can plan for an emergency, but nothing that you plan for, whether it's your tabletop exercises or your full-scale community-involved exercises, nothing happens exactly the way you thought it was going to be.
We always plan. We always try to plan and train for the scenarios we see, but at the same time, we never know what's going to happen when we get there. I mean, the weather could be different than we planned for. Winds could be coming a different direction. A lightning strike, a car fire, a house on fire. We never know what is going to start that and what variables are going to be in play. And so any time could be devastating.
We can plan for and predict what might happen, But in reality, what's taking place on the ground is stuff that we can't model for, we can't predict because it's never happened.
Here locally with Kern Fire Safe Council and ourselves, we're starting to get back into the schools. Some of the neighboring forests are still doing fire prevention programs in the school.
Ready, Set, Go, we presented to fifth graders in 3 schools in Woolly communities of Kern County. And it's actually a CAL FIRE program. The ready part is home hardening, creating defensible space. The set part is to make lists of the things you want to take if you have to evacuate, a contact list, make a disaster plan and practice it. And then you go. And you go with your important documents, things that are meaningful to you, like family pictures, with your pets, with your kids, with your medications, your glasses, your phone and chargers and those kinds of things.
We have young adults and young students in our community that know what it's like to live with fire. Many of these individuals, many of these young children have lived through wildfires, maybe not affected their home directly, but affected their community, affected their friends.
These children are living in the rural areas of Kern County, and so it's very pivotal that they understand the importance of their footprint in the forest, as well as understanding being prepared and ready to leave at a moment's notice.
The preparedness part in the schools program is really a good place for us to be because we're preparing children. They're taking those plans and those questions home to their parents, like, hey, why don't we have an escape route? Why don't we know how to get out of our house in the event there's a fire in the living room or the kitchen?
My specialty is working with school kids. I can speak to large members of families that are in the campground as well, but I really enjoy working with kids.
We talk a lot about recreation on our part as the Forest Service. When you're going camping, when you're going recreating, when you're having fun on public lands, building campfires. Why do you need to be safe? Why should you not leave them unattended?
It's really up to each individual to be conscious when you're having a campfire, a wood-burning stove, or otherwise, you have an active fire, to be following the proper safety protocol.
In the Ready, Set, Go program, it talks about the fire triangle. And kids and everybody should know that fire needs 3 things: heat, oxygen, and fuel. If you take away one of those things, you don't have fire.
We teach these kids, about how to call 911, put smoke detectors up in their house, and then we'll see in a day or 2 or something, we may come across a kid that put it into effect, and then we see right there the real results of, the information we gave them, and then it was put into action. So, these are important programs.
The kids are soaking up this information, and again, it does empower them to be little safety stewards around their house and around their community. They all got a go bag that was provided to us from the California Fire Foundation. We just got a grant from CAL FIRE for an inflatable education house that teaches kids. They go through how to get out. It's got fire tips like candles here and there, a fireplace in there. They can see the hazards and recognize them. I feel like kids are often underserved when it comes to disaster preparedness and fire safety habits, and they shouldn't be.
It is very important to teach young students the importance of fire safety, not just in the home and calling 911. That's normally the local fire department's messaging, and we absolutely, in partnership with them, communicate that with our school programs. The Fire Safe Council, and we put on more of a responsible why is fire good, why is fire bad message for them to understand in the recreation sense. So, and then teaching them what it means to be fire safe. We also bring in Smokey Bear. Generally, Smokey Bear is a younger educational tool that we use for students. Only you can prevent wildfire. That's Smokey's message. So it is a message that transcends generations, but if we instill that in young minds, and these messages are hitting home with them in a community where they live with wildfire and they see white engines and yellow engines and green engines working together, they understand it's their responsibility.
We hope to start the communication between the students and their parents, and then we also host monthly webinars to help educate and prepare families and communities.
We want to get people on board, even if they only serve for a year, 2 years. Commit to coming in and serve whatever you got, what gifts and talents you have, bring forward, bring to the table, and serve in some capacity and help us get that developed. And I think the more our presence is known, the more they see us out here doing this job, working with Kern County Fire Department, the U.S. Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, CAL FIRE, the more they see it, the more it'll click with them. Wow, this is serious. It's important to preserve life. We want to convey the importance of life first, property second. Property can be replaced, homes can be rebuilt, memories can be remade. There's nothing more precious than your life and that of your loved ones.